So you're a trauma therapist for elementary schools, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then you're based in Illinois.
Mhm. Yep.
It's Illinois or Illinois?
Oh, no S, no
Okay,
S,
no
just
S.
Illinois. The S is silent. Yes.
I heard
Us
they'll
Illinoisans, we cringe with that.
I heard they throw you in jail if you say it the wrong way.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Do you work with, because you're not like, you don't work for the school, you work for like, you're like contracted out, right?
Correct. So I work for a community-based agency and then they work with the school to create a contract, but I'm stationed at the same school 40 hours plus a week,
Wow.
working with the same kiddos every day. So it's pretty cool.
Like a district or just kind of like one building?
For me, I'm in one building. So our trauma therapist school-based program is made up of 6 therapists, and we're in 6 of our elementary schools in the district. Our district is pretty big. I think there's 22 or 23 elementary schools, and we're in 6 of
Wow.
them.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, how does it determine what schools get a therapist, which don't?
Yeah, that's the tough part because it's really up to the admin. So the admin choose if they want to contract with us or not. So based on those the goals they have for the building and where they see their vision going is what schools want to pay for us. So
Okay. If
yeah.
so if one school that doesn't have a therapist in it and they like need something, will they send like someone from a different school over? Or are they kind of like on
So
their own?
we have a lot of different supports in our community, which is amazing. So if they don't have a trauma therapist, like from our program, there's another community agency that provides like crisis services,
Hmm.
and they can call and get their counselors to come to the building, do an assessment. So if they don't have a trauma therapist in-house, they can at least get a counselor to come out and do some of those more like high risk cases and calls.
That
So
that's kind of like a new thing. Is it like having a therapist like actually in the school? Is that pretty new?
it is a dream come true. So I was actually at the other agency I spoke to doing the crisis work. And so at that agency in that program, I was in and out of every school in this district, in all of the county's schools and districts. I'm talking all elementary, all middle, all high school. And you tend to see patterns of schools that have higher crisis, calls compared to other ones. And so I would find myself spending more times in certain elementary schools where I wish that I could be in-house and doing more preventative instead of intervention when the crisis comes. I would have loved to be there to provide some services to reduce those crisis calls. But unfortunately, when you're the crisis worker, it's hard to play crisis worker, counselor, and attend to all of the needs that you have at the other schools in the county. And so this is a dream come true where you have a therapist in-house. We provide clinical and clinical only. We are there to do counseling, to do groups, to do therapy. And it really has reduced the amount of calls that have at least come into my school for crisis intervention response. So it's really exciting.
Wow. So when I was in K through 12, we had like school counselors, but they were just kind of more like schedulers. Do you guys work with them, or is it they kind of like separate?
Yeah, so in our district, we have school social work in our building. So every building should have a school social worker. The unfortunate part is it's not always a full-time social worker. So I'm not really sure how they figure out who gets part-time, who gets full-time. But we do, in our position, work very closely with the social worker. In the school social work, you typically have your caseload, and it's a caseload for special ed. So those students with IEPs and 504s who get those social work minutes, that's the type priority because you got to meet those minutes by law, right? To meet those needs. And unfortunately, what happens then is some of our other kids who don't have IEPs, 504s, they get overlooked or they get dismissed because the priority is to meet those IEP meeting minutes. And the cool thing about the therapy position is that I can pick that up. So we've got a kid who could use social work, could use some SEL stuff. I can jump in if they don't have an IEP, they're not open to social work, and that kid still gets serviced. So kind of went on a small tangent, but I don't do any of the guidance stuff. Strictly clinical. So I am literally a community-based counselor just stationed in the schools. It's
Cool.
awesome.
And then you're elementary only.
I am actually working on hopefully, broadening our trauma therapy program and getting into middle school, getting into high school, and kind of spreading the wealth.
And that's
But
what, like
my position,
age?
yeah.
That's
Yes.
like 8 through a 12, not 12. How old are all elementary students?
Oh, yeah. How old are they? So, I mean, we have kindergartners that are barely pushing 5, and then we have fifth graders who leave at like 11.
Okay. So when I
Yeah.
think of therapy, I don't think of and 5-year-olds and fifth graders. How does that kind of like work, and like how much like trauma can a 5-year-old have in their life?
Yeah,
If that
so
makes sense.
it's an awesome question because I've learned throughout the years that a lot of people are puzzled by therapy with, especially 5 and under and how that works. My approach, I can speak to that, is a lot of play therapy, creative expressions and art. And, I use modalities from all of these different hands-on interventions, techniques, and theories because when you think of therapy, unfortunately, the thought is you sit across from somebody and you talk about your thoughts and feelings. Think of any 5-year-old in your life that you've met or known. Are they going to sit in, in your office in a chair and have a conversation with you? Like, no. So for what I do is a lot of play-based stuff, whether that's non-directive or directive, meaning they have control of the playroom. We reflect feelings, we reflect thoughts, they act out things that have happened to them. Or if it's directive play therapy, meaning, there's obviously directives, but a lot of that for me looks like feelings Uno or feelings Jenga, feelings Candyland, and using games and board games to interact and teach skills through play. I do a lot of bibliotherapy, so reading books that have messages that we can talk and process, puppet work. I mean, I could go on and on. I love using sand tray modalities. My principal is so supportive and allowed me to set up a whole sand tray room pre-COVID, where I'd have hundreds of miniatures and I would do sand trays with the kids individually or groups, which when we talk about our younger kiddos, especially, and trauma and how trauma impacts the brain, we're talking about healing that right side of the brain. So that side of the brain that speaks more to creative expressions, art, memory, emotions, impulse control. So we speak to that nonverbal side of the brain, which is the right side of the brain. And a lot of these things that I use are creative, are artsy, and really touch to those things that our kids need to work through. And as far as that part of the question of how much trauma can a little baby being have, I mean, you can start having trauma experiences in the womb. And unfortunately, we see that a lot where I'm at and where I'm working. Our community is unfortunately impacted by a lot of very scary things, a lot of community violence, high drug use, homelessness. I could go on and on. Our poor community as a whole is traumatized in a sense just by everything going on in the world. And then look at this, we are in a pandemic. So,
Yeah.
that global trauma, and working through that and some of those fears and worries through play, it's awesome.
So who sees you? Like every kid? Like does every kid have like a slot, or do they have to ask for help, or do teachers bring them to you?
I mean, so I like to say I work with the whole school, and I do in a sense. My door is pretty much open. You have to go through some of those details where you have to get consent and get papers back, and sometimes that puts a barrier in servicing children. But the referrals that I get can come from teachers, my admin, me seeing a kid crying in the hallway and seeing what's up and noticing within the first 2 minutes that this kid needs to maybe have a couple sessions with me. Parents, they can call and talk to me and say, hey, we just had a death in the family. Do you mind seeing my kiddo? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I pretty much receive it from all ends. I also make an effort to really put myself in positions where I meet every single kid in the school. So whether that's classroom push-ins, eating lunch in the lunchroom with the kids, doing after school clubs and activities, because I can get a sense then it's pretty easy for me to tell that kiddo's struggling with something. I check in with the teacher, what's going on, and then I'm able to then call the parent, work with the parent, come up with the plan and see if I can and work with their kid in some capacity, whether it's group, individual, a check-in every couple weeks just to keep a relationship open and that door open so they know that they have me to talk to if something does, happen.
So if a kid gets referred to you, do they want to be there almost? Like if I feel like if a teacher's like, hey, you need to go see this lady and do therapy, I'd be pretty like, I
Yeah,
don't
a
think I
little
would be very
hesitant,
open to that.
right?
Yeah.
I always talk to my staff about a huge part of my job is really trying to break down those barriers and the stigma of counseling because people hear it and they sometimes cringe, right? Like,
Hmm.
you shouldn't be talking to a counselor. If you're talking to a counselor, something's wrong, right? And so I really try to make my approach as like as less threatening as I can make it, if that makes any sense. And that's where showing my face at lunch and coaching basketball and coaching soccer, it's not like I'm this scary counselor who's in her office all the time. Every kid in the school knows who I am. Um, I'm not tooting my own horn, but a little bit. The kids like fight over time with me because they are excited, and I make counseling fun. So it's not a painful experience. We talk about painful things, but it's always in a very strength based way where the kids leave my office feeling good. Like if my kids are leaving my office not feeling positive about something, then I didn't do my job well. So to answer your question, like, no, they really are excited. And when their parents answer and send their papers back, they're running in the hallway like, Miss Sarah, I've got my papers. Can I see you tomorrow? And it warms my heart because I think we are working on breaking down some of those barriers and normalizing that we are humans. And even at 5, we can have bad days and we can work through it and learn skills at 5 instead of at 25 to help us regulate, and hopefully have some of these kiddos blossom into some well-functioning, skilled adults. So again, not tooting my own horn, but they enjoy it.
So you said play therapy is a big thing for you. You said feelings
Yeah.
Uno. What is feelings Uno? How do you play
Oh,
feelings Uno?
feelings Uno is so fun. So it's normal Uno. So
Yep.
first I take a couple sessions to make sure we can master normal Uno.
Okay.
But then every time you put down a card, I have like a key. And so if you put down a blue one, a question could be share a time you felt sad. Or what does sadness mean to you? And if you put down a red 3, what is anger? What does anger look like to you? Share a time that you felt angry. Um, the purpose of that game specifically is to build our emotional vocabulary. It's to work on emotion identification, to work on being open about our thoughts and feelings, because even as adults, it's really hard to talk to people about how you feel. Um, and like I mentioned earlier, we're channeling them that left side of the brain as well as accessing some of these verbal, logical, rational types of things, which are really hard for kids. And so I like to say that everything I do serves a purpose. Everything is therapeutic. And whether we play normal Uno or feelings Uno, we're talking about teamwork if we're in a group setting, taking turns, sharing, being a sore winner and a sore loser, following directions, keeping our cool. You feel frustrated. Great. Let's work through it together. Let's co-regulate. Let's learn these skills and put them into practice. And so yeah, I mean, games are awesome.
Is
You can do a lot with them.
Is the Jenga one similar? Like if you pull out a piece, there's like a question on it or something?
Yeah, my Jenga one is a lot more like get to know you questions. So, like, what's your favorite color? If you could vacation anywhere, where would you go? What's your favorite food? And similar to Uno, whether we play get to know you Jenga or feelings Jenga, there's always intention behind it. We're talking about impulse control. If you just pick the first piece you see, you're going to lose. And so stopping, thinking, pulling the piece that makes sense to you, taking your time, slowing down, taking a breath. Like there are so many things that go into it aside from the basic rules of the game and even the directives that I give in the game that have a lot of learning to it.
Oh, are there like the questions on like your Uno and Jenga where there's like standard, you just have the same questions for everybody, or do you like kind of like tailor them for students?
I like to say I referee these games. Let's say we're in a group setting. I don't play with them. I let them engage in a lot of group problem solving, and I'll sit back and be like the question reader. And so if I know a kiddo struggles with talking about sad feelings or defining what sadness means, sometimes I play a little trickery and I ask a question that might be for the blue 2 instead of the blue 4 they put down to make sure that they get an opportunity to address that question because I know they need that. So yes, I tailor it to their needs as I need. But it really just depends on the group.
Do you have an order? Like it seemed like your Django was kind of like maybe your first meeting, and then your Uno was maybe like maybe a few sessions in. Do you have like an order of games you
Yeah.
go through?
Sometimes I like to kind of go with this flow because what I want people to understand is, let's say a kid gets in trouble and you're like, why did you do that? You're like asking them because you want to understand, and they're like, I don't know. But how can we expect a kid to label their feelings, label their thoughts if we don't give them the vocabulary to be successful in that? So typically all of my sessions, if I'm starting with a new kid fresh, let's say, it's building the relationship, building that rapport, getting to know you. So doing things like get to know you Jenga, drawing a family tree, who lives in your house, who are you in your family. We move into emotion identification, so building that emotional vocabulary, because I can't expect them to tell me their life story if they don't even know what sadness means. And then we continue to move into these other topics that fit their needs, like impulse control, because we can't talk about stop and think and act if you don't know why you're not stopping and thinking and acting. We feel angry, so we have, more intense impulses, and let's talk about that. Coping and savoring. So we just talked about feelings. You're telling me you know what those mean. Okay, let's talk about what those feelings, what kind of choices they lead to, how we can talk about controlling our body and staying calm. But again, how can I talk to a kid about being calm and controlling your feelings if they don't even know what they are? So there is somewhat of a flow in my intention. I do kind of guide myself with like an informal treatment plan, because there's definitely levels that you can't master the skill of impulse control without first mastering emotion identification, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And you also said sand tray therapy. I've heard of that, but I don't know exactly what it is.
That is my jam. I love that. I do that with whatever ages I'm working with. I've done it with 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, elementary, middle school, high school, parents, adults. Sand tray is amazing because it is one of those modalities where we are engaging that right brain. So even some of our adults who have experienced trauma, they struggle to verbalize it. So the sand tray allows them a space to heal that right brain, heal those memories, process some of those things in a tray. I like to think of sand tray as being less intimidating too. So a lot of the times when I work with adults or adolescents, there is some hesitation that you kind of spoke to about meeting with the counselor. And I love using sand tray to kind of just take a step back, like show me your world. I'm going to let you do your thing and give you some space and let me learn about you and tell me when you're done, and let's talk about it. And it's kind of like an ease into therapy. You're not going to come in, you're going to sit down and I'm going to interrogate you. You're going to come in, do your thing, I'll give you space, and then we can talk about it. So Sandtree is amazing. I am huge. Like that is my favorite thing, and COVID's really put a damper on me using it this
Yeah.
year, but I'm hopeful for next year. I still keep buying my miniatures all the time, and I'm ready for next school year to set up my shop and get that going again.
You said they let you build a sand tray room. What's a sand tray room? Is
Oh
that just
my
like a bunch of
goodness.
bins of sand?
So yes, there's so much that goes into it. I have a very type A personality, so I categorize my miniatures, which are like, the toys or things that go into the sand tray. I organize them into categories, very open-ended categories, because you want the kids to name things themselves. Like what's scary for you might not be scary for them and whatnot, but there's typically categories that go into it. So just envision like open-ended bookshelves just full of like figurines.
Mhm.
And my school let me have they were taller than me, bookshelves available that I could set up my figurines. I had 2 sand trays because, sometimes you used to. And yeah, they let me set up a shop in the back of a classroom, just a corner of sand tray. And I was stoked. So they're super
Wow,
supportive of my crazy ideas, and I love
that's
it.
cool.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned a couple times, like, your left brain, right brain, just, like, real quick, what's the difference between left and right brain?
So like so we have like 2 different hemispheres in our brain. So when we talk about therapy, counseling, it's a science, right? And a lot of it has to do with neurology. And we could go real in depth with this, but basically when you experience trauma or even just stress, it impacts your brain. And when we talk about like memories stored in the brain, so trauma really impacts the way our brain works, the way our brain functions. And so when I talk about the left and right brain, the differences are like the left brain is more verbal, logical thought, detail oriented, things that typically don't go hand in hand with children, right? Or even
Yeah.
some adults we know. The right brain, um, emotional thought, creativity, impulse, imagination, art, um, helps us empathize and build relationships with others. And sometimes when we experience trauma, that part of our brain is impacted. A lot of the times our kids have a hard time trusting others and building relationships with others. And when we talk about healing that right brain using play and creativity, we can help improve those connections, improve our brain to be able to build stronger connections with others, and process some of those things that have happened to us, and build on those thoughts and emotions. And even if we don't put words to it, the brain is working.
Mhm.
So it's just a different approach. Whereas there's a lot of theory and other approaches to counseling that do channel more of that left brain. And we're going to talk, we're going to verbalize, we're going to get logical with it. Let's rationalize this. And for kids, it's just not, and for some adults, it's just not it.
Yeah.
So
So you mostly target the right brain stuff?
I would say so. I mean, I definitely have some, speaking to my experiences now, I have a lot of kiddos who gravitate more towards that stuff anyways. Just developmentally, play is their language. That's where they're at.
Mhm.
But I have a handful of kids who do prefer just to sit and talk with me. So it really just depends on the kid. I would say majority gravitate more towards that play, creativity. It's also just fun. It's exciting for them. And so, I fit whatever needs they have. If they want to come in and
Yeah.
sit and we just chit chat, cool, run it. I'm fine with that. But typically it's more play based.
I forget when you mentioned this, but you said something about getting in trouble. So if someone gets in trouble in your school, do they send them to you or do they send them to detention?
Well, I actually do want to share about this. So our school started this program 2 years ago, and we have a calm classroom with a calm classroom teacher, and myself. So we started these new positions of the calm classroom and the trauma therapist at the same time. So the hopes of that were to, of course, service more kids, meet the mental health needs in the building, but also the intention was to hopefully reduce the amount of referrals and suspensions that we were having at our school. So instead of going from, a certain amount of referrals to out of school suspension to maybe in school suspension to then out of school, suspension, you see patterns. You have certain kids, they just, they
Mhm.
struggle. Um, we now have this calm classroom where it's like, okay, you're getting referrals. We see there's a need there. You're going to spend some time in the calm classroom with our calm classroom teacher, who our teacher this year, she is a fantastic general education teacher, but she's also so incredible with the SEL stuff, so the social emotional learning. And what she does when the kids are in there is she'll focus on those academic needs because those are important, but she also gives breaks. We practice mindfulness. We do some yoga stretching. Let's talk about taking 5 and what that means. How do we deep breathe? What is square breathing? So in that space, it's more intimate. It's typically one teacher and maybe 4 or 5 kids tops, doing academic work, but also learning the SEL stuff as well, reflecting on the choices they may be making and how they can do better. We are big on restorative justice. So let's say a kid destroyed a classroom. How are you going to repair the harm? What's the game plan aside from an apology? You need to go help pick up trash. You need to go organize that teacher's library. Like, we work every angle of that student, to help them build the skills and tools to not continue repeating the same choices that they've made. So myself and that calm classroom teacher work really hard together to address the holistic needs of the child to help them be more successful in school and hopefully spend less time in out of school suspension so we can get them back into the classroom.
Was that something
So
that you helped bring in, or was that there before you came
So
to this
we had one
school?
elementary school start that program. They were kind of like our pilot program with the secure class or the calm classroom and the therapist, and it was very well received. And so my principal is like all about it. He is super great at understanding academics, absolutely important, but we can't expect our academics to improve when our kids' mental health is declining. So he was like, this sounds cool. Let's try it here. He brought me on board, our calm classroom teacher on board, and this is year 2, and it's awesome. Our
Yeah.
suspensions, it's hard to compare data from the year before just because of COVID. We had to end our
Mhm.
school year, the way we
Yeah.
ended it last year. But my assistant principal pulled some data for me this week, and our referrals alone went down 35% between September and March last year with the addition of myself in the calm classroom, which is huge.
What
So
what's a referral? Like, a referral to what?
So if a student makes a poor choice, a teacher can put in a referral, meaning that, they get in trouble, they have to sign a paper, there's consequences depending on what the referral is, depends on the consequence. But, students could get referrals for not keeping their hands to themselves, throwing something across the lunchroom, not being safe. not doing their work when they're supposed to, or walking out the classroom because that's unsafe. So you can get a referral for a lot of different things. And we take that into account too. Like, okay, what is this referral for, and what's the best game plan for them? Do we focus our calm classroom time on impulse control, or do we focus on emotion identification? Because this kid ended up sobbing for 3 hours after he made a poor choice and verbalized just feeling very sad. And so we take what's on the referral with a grain of salt, because typically there's other underlying things going on that lead to the choices that these kids make.
It's a nice word for it. I think we called it just getting written up.
I know, right? Yeah, we use some good language now. Yeah, it's a referral, but it's exactly what you're speaking to. It's getting a write-up. So
Is that important, changing that kind of terminology, or is that kind of inconsequential?
no, I think it's very important. I know that part of my job, I have so many parts, but part of my job is really just um, making this language and this vocab consistent throughout the school. So like if you popped into any classroom at my school, they would know what a feelings check-in is. So I'm seeing how you're doing today. Give me a feeling word. They know what coping skills are. You're having a hard day. What coping skill can we use today? So these types of terms and language, like what's your job? Your job's to be a student. Are you doing your job? Is consistent throughout the whole school. So that I can pop into any classroom, use that verbiage, and they know. And the verbiage that we use is very strength-based.
Mhm.
So when kids get in trouble, they're held accountable, but it's very much so, okay, but Johnny, you are a strong leader. Okay. I know that you want to tell people what to do, but let's put you in a different role. Let's put you as a classroom line leader, and really build on your leadership strengths, because you bossing Susie around just got you in trouble. So let's put you in a position where these strengths can be built upon, instead of putting these kids in a position where those strengths sometimes put them in positions to get in trouble. We have lots of very strong personalities. It's incredible. I swear I'm going to have the next president of the United States from my school one day. But sometimes those strong personalities lead to very poor choices. But we are very intentional about identifying those strengths, helping them identify those strengths, and building on them, because they have amazing strengths. They just don't know how to channel them necessarily.
That's one of the things on your, I think I saw it on your LinkedIn, is you use a strength-based approach. What, like, that's just kind of like telling you, like, building their strengths in a positive way instead of a negative way.
Yeah, and even like what we were speaking to, that language. So really reframing some of the choices they make, or how we talk about kids. If someone's really frustrating you, like, it's Johnny had a really hard day, but how amazing did he do on his math test, right? So celebrating those little victories. And it's so easy for our teachers and our staff to be burnt out. Like I relate. It's so easy for us to get negative and hard on these kids who sometimes drive us crazy, but really reframing that of like, you know what? Johnny came to school today. He had a horrible night last night. He went through A, B, and C, but did Johnny get here today? He did. Let's celebrate it. Like, we are really working as a school to be more strength-based and really highlight those celebrations that maybe even seem small or trivial, because some of those little things to us are like big deals for our kids, and they should be praised for those all the time.
Yeah. And you did before you were in the elementary school, you did therapy for the foster care system, for kids in the foster care
Yes.
system. Is there
Yep.
any difference between kids like in the foster care system versus kids maybe like not in the foster care system, I guess?
So there's different, I would say, like job duties or responsibilities that I have from my previous position to this one. But as far as the population, it's pretty much my same group of kids. I'm in the same community. I'm still doing work with parents, so it feels very similar. I just do less like meetings with child protective services and those other job duties that I had to attend to when working with foster care, and billing and things like that. But for the most part, it feels very similar. I just get to be stationed at a school and see my kids like every day instead of once every week or 2 weeks. So, but lots of overlap.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there any like kind of unique or more prevalent struggles for kids in a foster care system versus just in the school?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about a kiddo in foster care, whether they've been in it for a day or for 6 years, I mean, their whole worlds have been turned upside down. And going back to what we talked about earlier of how much trauma could a 5-year-old have, I've had
Yep.
5-year-olds who have been in 6 or 7 foster homes. And that alone I mean, again, think of us as adults and having to move 6 times in 5 years, and being ripped away from your biological family, and they're your home. Like, that's what you know, and that's what you're used to. And whether it was a healthy or safe place or not, you're being taken from that and you're being put somewhere unfamiliar. And it really takes a toll on our kids and on their lives and how they regulate their feelings. And they just really go through it. And so, yeah, I would say there's a lot of things going on there, even aside from that, just them navigating the system, having to navigate visitation with family and how confusing that can be when they go back home to their foster family. Um, when I was in the position that I was in a couple years ago doing community-based counseling services with kiddos in foster care, I mean, there are so many moving parts. For myself, it was difficult to navigate. And for a 5-year, 6-year-old, not understanding why they can't go home after a visitation with mom, or why they have to do all of these things and meet with all of these different people. And you have caseworkers, investigators, counselors, case managers. There's so many people involved in these kids' lives, which is a huge blessing that they have the support, but it's also very confusing and overwhelming. So that's just a few things that our babies struggle with when they're in foster care.
Is it easier for you to kind of like identify or uncover maybe their traumas if like do foster care kids kind of like sort of all have the same experiences? Is it easier for you to like kind of know what they're going through just from knowing they're in the foster care system?
Yes and no. I think it's pretty easy to say, yes, this kiddo's been through it, whether you know something about them or not. If you have a new kiddo at your school and you're told, yes, this kiddo's in foster care, you know that they're probably coming in with some type of challenges and stressors, and they might need support. But every kiddo and every experience they have, even siblings, if they experience similar things, they present differently. Their behaviors manifest differently. They all regulate differently. So yes, it's helpful for me to know, just because I know that they're probably going through it and they're going to need support. But as far as knowing what's to come, no, it presents differently for every
Yeah.
kiddo. Yeah.
And you've also done a lot of crisis intervention work. Has that been like over the phone or like a chat line or in person?
No, it's in person. It's in
Oh,
person, and it's 24/7. So here in Illinois, we have a program that's called the SASS program. So it's a screening, assessment, and support services program. And basically, families can call our 24-hour crisis hotline, and that's like statewide. It's called the CARES line. If they have a child that they feel is not safe, they can't keep them safe, they're a risk to themselves or somebody else, and they need someone to come assess to see what next steps would be, which would be, deflecting on a safety plan and getting outpatient services, connected for them, or it might be inpatient hospitalization, the path that they need to take for that kiddo to keep them safe. And so basically, the way that the program functioned at my agency is you were on the SASS team, and there was, when I was there, it ranged from like 5, sometimes if we were lucky, 10 people working the day shift, so 8 to 5. But between us, we also had to cover the rest of the hours of the day. And so I would end up working my 8 to 5 and be on call from 5 to midnight or midnight to 8 a.m. and have to go to work from 8 to 5. But we made it happen. And it's honestly a wonderful program, because it services and supports our families who may not have insurance or their Medicaid. So even if they don't have insurance, they can call through this CARES line and get at least minimum 90 days of support services. So that's huge, because then our families who don't have insurance aren't afraid to reach out and get help for their kids who are in mental health crisis. So it's a great program, but being a worker in it, it was
yeah.
a lot.
Did you go to them or did they come to you?
So in my agency in our counties, we would go to them. So whether
Okay.
they called and they were at home, yeah, we'd go to the home. A lot of the times they'd be at the hospital, we go to the hospital. A lot of the relationships I've created in the schools over the last so many years I've been here, because I did SASS, and they would call us and I'd be in and out of their schools, every so often,
Hmm.
frequently, to service their kids who are in crisis. So
Yeah.
it's wherever they're at, we go.
So if someone like calls you, or I guess if you see them for a crisis call and you have to refer them to like a hospital or an agency or something like that, is that difficult to get them to actually follow through with that? Can you like make them?
No, you can't necessarily make them. I mean, if there's those situations where you do an assessment and you're like, this kid needs inpatient, they can't stay safe in the community, like they are a huge risk to hurt themselves or someone else, they need inpatient, and the parents refuse, then unfortunately you have to take a path that's not, the path you want to take, and you can call Child Protective Services. But it rarely got to that. Typically, if parents called the crisis line, it's because they knew their kids needed help, and they were, I would say majority were extremely supportive in whatever that looked like, whether it was hospitalization, outpatient counseling. Um, Again, in the area that I'm in, sometimes those barriers to being consistent with those outpatient services would be transportation. They just didn't have transportation to get their kids to appointments. Um, Back in the building that I was at before, the bus would only go so far and it wouldn't go to our agency. And so they, you're like, okay, we'll be resourceful, use the bus, but the bus didn't go to our agency. And
Yeah.
so they had a lot of these other barriers of like, okay, I hear you, and I'm glad that you're helping me link my child to a counselor, but we can't get there. And so there's these whole other moving pieces that are barriers into getting our kids the assistance and services they need. But I would say my parents, most of them put in a ton of effort to try to make it happen the best they can.
When you hit one of those barriers, like, is there like, do you do anything, or you just be like, sorry, I guess, like try to figure it out, or?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I would help as best as I could. If it was arranging rides, if it was helping call a taxi to get them to their appointments, if it was picking them up myself, because at the time in that position, we were also community based. So we would go out and do assessments, but we'd also have a caseload that we would follow up with. And so if it was somebody on my caseload and they're like, Miss Sarah, I can't get my kid there, like my car's not working, I would pick up the family and take them to make sure that they were able to get to the appointment. And if that's not always the case, you help get resourceful. If it's gas money, our agency would be able to provide gas gift cards. We really did try to work to help them overcome these barriers, understanding that their kids' mental health is a priority and these parents are trying. So yeah, I definitely would pick up families though and
Yeah.
get them to the appointments. So
I wonder if like Uber would do something where like they would like give you credits or something to get places you need to for
you know
health stuff.
what? If Uber's listening, that would be amazing. Because even in the schools, I sometimes still have that issue where I link, my kids to outside counselors because sometimes they need more intensive services or wraparound services, or, I don't service as frequently as I do during like in the school year as I do in the summertime. And I want those kids to still be seen weekly in the summer. So I'll refer them out and work with the outside counselor together, like as a team approach. And sometimes I link them out and they can't get to their appointments. And so they end up being closed. And I still have that problem.
Yeah.
And it's not for lack of trying. There's just these things that are, barriers.
Yeah. So hey, at Uber, listen up.
Yeah. Hey, if you're listening, contact me. I would love to start a program because it would be much used and much needed. And I know that not just for the kids, the adults sometimes have trouble getting to their appointments too. So
Yeah.
let me know.
Or Lyft.
Yes,
we won't
either
cancel
one
you
of
out,
them.
Lyft.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know.
You coach soccer and basketball too?
Yes.
Do you play those sports?
Okay. Soccer, yes. Basketball, absolutely not.
Oh,
Did I have a blast though? Yes. When we talk about my approach being very strength based, I'm that coach that is like, you are so amazing. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, I have no clue what's going on. I don't know what the refs, yelling at me, but I'm just like loving that these girls are doing something outside of school and they're having fun and being kids. And so when they asked me to coach last year basketball, I was like, I don't think you want me to be the coach. Um, but here I go. And you know what? My girls did amazing. We won our first playoff game. We lost after that, but they were awesome. Soccer, I did play in for a
yeah.
long time, for like 12 years. So that was something I started. I wanted to start it back up at the school. They didn't have a team when I got there. My principal was super supportive. And so we taught these kids pretty much from scratch. We had one kid on our team of 20 who knew how to play soccer, and yeah, the lessons don't stop in the school walls, man. That patience and teamwork and following directions, man. We went and they worked their butts off. They did. They were incredible and learned how to play a sport they've never even watched before and
Yeah.
did amazing. So
Were
it's
those
fun.
elementary ages or a little bit older?
Yes, yeah, and it's the
Yeah.
cutest thing because they didn't have that at my elementary school. I think it wasn't until middle school. So this is like fourth and fifth grade kids just being the cutest out there trying to play soccer. It was amazing. I'm
I'm
so
trying.
sad COVID took it from me this year because we didn't get to do it. So,
Like, I think
um,
for my elementary school, I don't think we had, like, school teams, like, we had, like, it was kinda like spin-offs, but it wasn't, like, by the school, I don't know. Like, I think school sports
yeah,
started in middle school for us.
I think it was for me too. And we have so many elementary schools. So the ones who participated, it was like a legit, like a legit league. We had a different school every week. We'd go travel to the other
Wow.
schools and play there. Like it was legit. It was a lot of
Wow.
fun. So next
Huh.
year, hopefully we can start it up again.
Yeah. I was gonna ask if you're a player's coach or more like a disciplinarian coach, but I'm guessing that you're probably a player's coach.
No, I definitely get made fun of because some of the other coaches were like very competitive and intense. And I'm like on the sideline, like, yay, girls, like you're doing so great. Like, woohoo, like teamwork, like being a psycho sort of. But when my girls would hear my voice and they heard me praising them, they continued to play hard and they played well. And we learned how to play basketball together and it all worked out. I mean, I want my kids to be kids, and sometimes they don't have opportunity to do that. And so the fact that they were able to come and learn a new sport and be a child for an hour and a half, like my heart was happy. That's all I wanted.
This is more of a
So
sports question, I guess, but, like,
yeah,
did you play basketball like soccer, or did you have to learn basketball?
I played basketball, I think, for one season in like seventh grade.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with the sport. Like I know somewhat how to play. The problem is a lot of our kids don't know how to play. And so you throw them out there just to kind of learn. And then when you have me as your coach who can give very little guidance, the refs start to get a little frustrated. And I'm
Mm.
like, sir, like, please be patient. Like they have me as a coach. Like, we're learning together. Yeah, no, soccer was my sport. I played that for 12 years. Basketball, I did it once. I jammed my finger a couple times and called it a day.
Mm.
I never
Yeah.
revisited the sport again. But I relearned how to play this year, so I'm ready to coach next year if they need me to.
You get a basketball to the crown of the nose, and that might be it for you if that's too early.
I did play in our staff basketball game and I did make like a 3-point shot, like not to
Ooh.
brag. The kids went wild because they were so surprised because they've seen me try to play before. And so that was really fun to kind of finesse them a little bit, hustle a little bit, and make a basket. But it was pure luck. And I accidentally set the expectation bar for myself as a coach a little high after that game, but they quickly learned it was just a lucky shot. So.
So you said you used your strength based approach a little bit in your coaching. Is there anything else from like your experiences as a therapist and a counselor that you bring into like coaching?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like everything I do has intention, like even outside of the school walls when I'm coaching or I'm doing summer groups, because I do work in the summer and I engage some of those kids over the summer. Um, but everything we do has intention. And so I sat my kids down before and after every practice and we would reflect like, what did we practice today? We did teamwork. You guys took turns. You followed directions. What could we have done better? Maybe been nice to each other and like not cried when we lost, and let's talk about that and how can we do better next practice. And I would do, highlight the kids like, Johnny, the way that you helped her up when you knocked her over on accident, that was incredible. Please keep up the hard work and your leadership skills. Like my strength-based approach, it just doesn't seem to disappear, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, everything has intention. We're always learning something.
Yeah.
Kindness, leadership, like even in soccer, you're going to be nice to other people and we're going to learn how to solve conflict. Some of the kids weren't nice to my kids on the field and vice versa. And I sat there and worked it out with them. I'm pretty sure the other coaches thought I was insane. But I'm not going to let these kids talk bad to each other. So this is a learning moment, a teaching moment, and let's figure out how to solve this conflict together because it's important. It's a life skill.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't go away.
I feel like in like elementary sports, the teamwork and like the working through problems and stuff is probably a little bit more important than actually putting points on the board.
Yes, we definitely had a couple games where we lost like 12-0,
Mm.
and we processed that. It was like you're feeling sad, you're feeling defeated. Like what can we do to overcome this and cope with this? And we have tears and it's okay to have tears and normalize those feelings. So like everything had purpose. And I told my principal if they leave just even feeling better about themselves or feeling accomplished or feeling like they have some type of skill, even if it's like a kindness skill and not a sporty skill, my job is done. So
Do you have any
yeah.
like super competitive kids that aren't okay with like we learned from this and it's okay that we lost by 12?
Yeah, I had my one kiddo who knew how to play, he played travel. And so not
Yeah.
only did he know how to play, he was like a star athlete and he would just look at me like, Miss Sarah, like what are we doing? And I'm like, you know what? Just hang with me. This is not your travel team. And I would put him in a leadership role though. I'm like, okay, you know how to do this. Teach them this drill. Teach them this. What is that position? Instead of yelling at them out of frustration, help them learn because you're the only one on the team who knows how to play. So help me coach. I like to put kids in teaching positions, even in my groups of like, okay, you're a master at this. Yeah, roll your eyes. That's fine. But now you're going to help me teach. And so putting them in a different position to still keep it interesting to them. And we know that when we teach something, it typically sticks a little bit more. I'll put them in a teaching role. Like, okay, teach with me. Help me teach this lesson. This is easy for you. Cool. Help me teach it, to try to keep them engaged. But yeah, I mean, I got eye rolls. Absolutely. Parents even gave me eye rolls. They're like, Miss Sarah, this is a soccer game. I'm like, but we're learning. Okay. Like, we're learning. So yeah, I mean, it's just who I am.
What would you do if you put like a kid in like a leadership role and they were like teaching bad, I guess, or not how exactly you wanted it to do? How do you navigate that?
Well, it's just a lot of redirection of like, hey, Susie, remember you're helping me teach today. So be your best leadership self. Be a role model. And then I ask them, like, what does that mean to be a role model? Are you doing that? No? All right, let's fix it. And again, teaching moments. Like, we process through it in that moment. It's very generalizable to real life. Like, you sometimes make these choices outside of my room, and so let's work it out right now. Let's fix it and let's move on. And they're typically, if they're in the position where I put them in a teaching role, they're typically pretty quick to redirect, at least in that space.
Mhm.
And I just got to check them real quick, and they usually can fix it.
One of my coach's favorite sayings would always be like, "I wouldn't be teaching you or coaching this hard unless I thought you could like do it," or something like that. Is that one of the lines you throw out there a lot?
Yeah, I love like good quotes. But I mean, I made sure again before every practice, every game, I would do a little pep talk and I would just let my kids know how proud I was of them to even be here, to have come this far. We're on a team. We have jerseys. Like, I am so proud of you, and kind of like keep making me proud. Don't act a fool on the field. Like, let me see those strengths like shine through. Show that other school you know how to be, an awesome player and an awesome kid. And we would end every practice or game with, you know what, even if we lost, I'm still so proud of you. You acted kind, you were a good sport. So I would throw out some motivational stuff too. My favorite line is teamwork makes the dream work.
Oh,
um, if you walked into any class, I'm sure you'd hear the kids say that because I say it so often. I have 5-year-olds in the hallway like, Miss Sarah, teamwork makes the dream work. I'm like, it sure does. So it's hilarious. I love throwing out some motivational things like that because they grasp it. They love it. They think I'm cheesy, but they love it.
got many miracle speeches going on in the elementary
That's
soccer.
right. Yeah, yes. Uh-huh. We should probably actually be a movie because it's pretty
Oh,
inspirational around here. Yeah. No, but for real, they're awesome. And they respond well to praise. And that's what I give them every 2 seconds, whether they want it or not. I will find something to praise a kid for. So
you get the licensing rights to a movie, then you can have therapists in all
yeah,
23
if anyone's
schools or
out there,
however
let me
many.
know. Yeah, sign me up. Let me know.
We have like at Warner Brothers and Lyft and
Yeah,
Uber right now.
we
Okay.
just have to tag them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, hey, holler at me. I'm ready.
Is there anything you see like other coaches do that's kind of like a pet peeve or is it negative for their players?
Yeah. And I mean, speaking to my own experiences, I had because I played sports my whole life. Up until I went to college, I was in sports. Whether it was school or travel, I played on teams and I just learned from my own experiences what I did not respond well to from coaches. And like I said, I mean, our team wasn't super competitive. I mean, it's elementary, it's not
Yeah.
travel, like it's not. So I had a little more leeway where I could focus less on the skill building sport wise and the competitiveness. But I mean, yeah, you would see coaches in the same position as me, right next to me, like really encouraging some really poor behaviors. They would be screaming and yelling and being so discouraging. And I would cringe just because, like, we're in the same position, dude. Like, why are you yelling at your kids like that? It's an elementary soccer game. Like, They're doing I'd be like, "You're doing great," and they're not even on my team. Like, "You can do it," because I'm like, "This is like an 8-year-old. He's gonna
Yeah.
go home and remember this experience for the rest of his life." Because I know I do. I had coaches that were a little bit aggressive in their approach, and I have those memories. And the last thing I am going to do is traumatize a child and make them hate sports. And so, yeah, it's a little cringy, but I also try to take that as a teaching moment, as I always do, to kind of model some of these different ways to approach coaching, especially in elementary, because this isn't the Olympics. Like I would tell my kids all the time, this isn't the Olympics. Like, try your best. That's all I can ask. You didn't score a goal. I don't care. Did you try? Sweet. Whereas some of these other coaches were very goal focused and winning focused. And I just wanted my kids to have fun and do a good job as far as being nice to other people and some of these life skills. If they did what I expected them to do, which was be kind, follow directions, and be a good sport, then my heart was happy. And that's not always the approach with all coaches,
Yeah.
and that's fine. It is what it is, but it's just not me.
Do you ever make your kids run even though you're a strength-based approach? Or because
Absolutely.
I
I
feel
tell
like
my
just
kids.
because I had to run, I would make my kids run even if I didn't think it was gonna be helpful.
Well, yeah, because here's the thing, the soccer field is large and in charge, and I don't think my kids knew how big it was, and so they were huffing and puffing after 3 minutes of playing, and I'm like, "We can't have this." Like, so my kids worked, but I made sure they knew that you signed up for this and this was the commitment, and so if you wanna be on our team, you're gonna work just as hard as this kid's working, and we're gonna work as a team, and you're gonna run these laps. That's part of being on this team. And so don't get me wrong, we did drills, we did scrimmages. Like our practices weren't just a huge like group session. Like I worked them and they learned how to play the game by the end of the season. But my my focus wasn't on winning by any means. But my kids learned how to play. And let me tell you, they stopped catching the ball with their hands after like 1 or 2 games
Oh.
because that's where we were at skill wise. Like they didn't
Mm.
know how to play. So yeah, I worked them. They worked and they learned and they did incredible. So, and
So
they
did
ran.
did you use it as negative reinforcement or more like conditioning? What is your perceived role of negative reinforcement in sports, I guess? Especially for little kids.
I mean, I'm very much so a positive reinforcement in every approach of my life, even my
Mhm.
personal life, of like, again, celebrating those little victories. I feel like our kids want to please you. And so if you highlight the little things that they do well and you positively reinforce the smallest thing, like you brought your cleats today. Yay. Like literally the smallest things, they want to please you and they're more likely to make those good choices to get that positive praise. And you kind of nip those negative behaviors by just positively reinforcing the good ones, as small as they may be. So that's kind of my approach on everything, which is probably
Yeah.
why I coach the way I do, is I have seen better response and better improvement, I guess, in progress in every aspect using more of that positive reinforcement approach in the role that I'm in.
Mhm. I played lacrosse in high school and college, and in high school, my coach would set like a drop count. If you dropped like it was like maybe like 50 passes in a practice or something, then you would run. We did 800 yards, and then you would get to rest, and you do 400 yards twice, and then you would do 200 yards 4 times, and then 100 yards 8 times, 50 yards 16 times, and it was the worst. And if you got on like 24 and you're like almost at the end of practice, it's just like the most stress you could ever have. And if you're the person to drop that last ball, it was not a good time.
Yeah, no, I and the thing is too, our kids like they don't play sports very often. And again, I didn't want to be the person in their lives that made them hate running or hate sports. And so I try not to use like running laps and stuff as punishment. If they weren't acting right, they weren't being kind. It was more of like, let's sit down and reflect on it. And at the time when they wanted to play and they wanted to run, they weren't happy with that. They were like, we
Yeah.
just want to play. And I'm like, okay, well, as soon as we have this conversation and we fix it, then we can move on. So I didn't really use the sports piece as like running as consequence. It was more like, I mean, I don't even know what you would call it. It was like, okay, we're having issues. Let's sit down and talk about it, and then we can move on. Problem solving, I guess.